Hey guys, welcome back to part 2. I hope you enjoyed part 1. Now let's continue making the slingshot pistol. So the glue's pretty much set now. I'm just going to start rasping and shaping.
So again, with the shaping, I'm just going to be using rasps to curve the wood, and I'm going to curve the oak until it's flush with the wood, and then I'm going to curve the multiplex plywood so that you can see the different layers in it, and so that it flows nicely into the oak wood. So now I'm just drilling holes and then putting in screws on all of the places where the wood is going to be taking a lot of strain, just to support the wood glue, because the wood glue is not strong enough to take the strain by itself. I'm also going to be attaching a lot of screws to the piece of oak and the front piece, which is going to be holding the rollers. So once I've drilled in all of the screws and I've countersunk them in really far into the wood so that the screw heads don't stick out, now I'm going to be attaching the guides for the bolts. For the guides on the bolts, I'm just using some 3mm wide wood, which is 2mm thick, and I'm just going to be placing it down the length of the barrel, and I'm placing it really straight, and then I'm going to be securing it with some super glue and some thin nails. It's really important that when I place them, they've got to be completely straight, otherwise the pistol crossbow is going to be inaccurate. And it's also really important that they fit the bolts, which I'm going to be using really well. So I'm just using a bolt to measure how wide apart the pieces of wood have to be.
So now that I've secured everything on with screws, as you can see at the front here, I've used a lot of screws just to make sure this front piece is really securely on. And it is on very, very strong, and that's definitely not going to come off. And the same with this piece. And this is what the slingshot pistol should look like now. The guides for the bolt work really, really well, and now I just need to file everything and shape it all so that it looks nicer. So now that I've attached these wooden pieces to guide the bolt, what I can do is I can test out the trigger mechanism just by putting on some very, very weak bungee cord just there, and then holding it back, and then I can place the bolt in here, slide it back, and there'll be a clasp to hold this down that I haven't made yet, and then I just pull the trigger and then it should fire.
So now that I know that the trigger mechanism works, I'm just going to be filing and shaping all of the edges so that there's no right angled edges anywhere apart from along the bolt guides, and I'm also going to be smoothing out the bolt guides so that there's no abrasion when you're firing the slingshot pistol. Then once I've curved everything, I'm going to be going over it with a file and some 120 grit sandpaper so that it becomes quite smooth. It's important at this stage that you get any chips out of the wood, or that if there's any cracks in the wood that you glue them together, because later on it's going to be really hard. It's also important that you decide on the final shape for the slingshot pistol, and that you create any of the curves that you want in the slingshot pistol design to happen now.
So this is what the slingshot pistol should look like once I've got everything shaped up. Everything's also sanded up to 120 grit, and now I'm going to sand it all the way up to 400 grit.
For sanding it up to 400 grit, first I check that all of the deep scratches are out of the wood everywhere, and then I move on to some 240 grit. Once I've finished using 240 grit, then I move all the way up to 400 grit. And you can tell once you finish using the sandpaper, because it's no longer removing any more scratches out of the wood, and it's not making the wood any more smooth. Also, it's really important that you keep on using new pieces of sandpaper, because on a slingshot pistol this big, some sandpaper will become really smooth after a short amount of time. Once the sandpaper becomes smooth, it won't be able to remove enough scratches for you to be able to move on to the next sandpaper, and you'll be there for ages. Also, it's really important you use some wooden vice protectors to protect your slingshot pistol from the metal edges of the vice, which will put deep dents into the wood.
So this is what the slingshot pistol looks like once I've sanded it all the way up to 400 grit, and I actually sanded up this handle part all the way up to 600 grit, because that's going to be the main part where I'm going to be holding the slingshot pistol. And it looks really nice and it feels really nice, but now it's time to oil it. For the oil, I'm just going to be applying it in 3 thick coatings, one after the other, once they've dried, and then once I've oiled it, then I'm going to apply 1 layer of polyurethane varnish. The oil and the polyurethane varnish combined is going to make the slingshot completely watertight and scratch proof. I'm just going to be using sunflower oil to oil it. So this is what the slingshot pistol looks like once I've oiled it with 3 coats of oil and then 1 coat of polyurethane varnish, which I just have in a spray-on can, so it's really quick to apply. And as you can see, it brings out the grain and the wood really nicely, and I think it makes the slingshot pistol look really good. Also here, I attached a returning trigger mechanism, so when you pull the string back, it'll go like this, and then it'll click back up easily, and once you pull the trigger, it'll just click back up. So now it's time to make the rollers. So for the rollers, this is what you're going to need. So firstly, you're going to need this. Now this looks really complicated, but it's not. It's basically just 3 skateboard bearings, all sellotaped together with duct tape and insulation tape with 2 fat washers on either side. The reason I haven't shown you making them is because they were an improvement for my old Assassin's Creed wrist-mounted crossbow that I made a while ago, but I never actually showed the improvement on video. So that's what these are from, and the reason that I'm using skateboard bearings is just because they reduce the friction so much under the pressure. You can just use a wooden dowel rod with a hole just drilled down the middle, but there's a lot of friction when you fire it, and that really does slow down the shot quite a lot. Then you're going to need a bolt, 2 nuts and a washer.
So before you attach the rollers, you need to drill a hole for the bolts to go through, and the hole should just be slightly wider than the diameter of the bolt, and try and drill the hole vertically, and if you can, use a drill press, but it doesn't matter if you don't have a drill press, because when you tighten up the nuts of the bolt, it should pull the rollers vertically.
So this is how to attach the rollers. It's really quick and easy. You basically just get the roller, you put it onto the bolt like this, and then you take a nut and you screw it all the way up until it's almost touching the roller, so the roller's got a tiny bit of room to vibrate, and then you put the roller through here so that it's coming out the other side of the multiplex plywood. Then you put the spacer on, and then you tighten up this bolt against this bolt here, so that then the roller can still spin freely and it's attached securely to the wood. So now that both rollers are attached and they spin freely, then now it's time to attach the parts for the bands to attach, and I'm going to attach them either side on here. So I've drilled the holes for the pins, and as you can see, they're not exactly lined up on either side, which I'm kind of annoyed about after I spent so long on aesthetics on the rest of the slingshot pistol, but they'll still be fine. Now I need to super glue them in and then cut them off. So this is what the band attachment parts look like once I've bent them with the vise and then cut them off, and then deburred the edges with just some files, and then I also glued on this piece with super glue and then cut off the edge here, and the trigger mechanism still works perfectly. Now it's time to make the clasp, which is going to hold the bolts in place.
So for making the clasp, I'm just using an old piece of metal from an old ruler, and I've cut it off at 7 centimeters long, and I'm just hammering it with a hammer on the back of my vise, and I'm just using a nail against the piece of metal and a hammer just to get the curves in the metal, and I need to get the curves right, and then you'll see what the final shape of the curves on the clasp should look like once it's done.
So this is what the metal clasp looks like once I've hammered it out so that it's the right size and everything, and then it'll just be on like that, and it's going to be held on by pins that are just going to go through it, and I'm going to drill them in a minute, and then the bolt can come on here and slide in, and then that holds it in place. Now I'm going to drill 2 small holes through here so I can put pins in it. So I've attached the arrow clasp now, and it's all attached with just nails and super glue on the top, and it works really well to hold the bolts in place. As you can see here, when you have a bolt, you can just slide it in like this, and then the arrow clasp holds it in place like that, and you can slide it all the way back. Now the slingshot pistol is completely complete. Now it's time to make and attach the bands. Since I've already got a tutorial for how to make and attach slingshot bands on my YouTube channel, there'll be a link in the description down below if you don't already know how to make the bands. For my bands, I'm going to be using TheraBand Gold. So now I've added the bands, and I've got 3 bands per side, and this is much more powerful than just having 2 bands per side like I did before. And I've shot these bands about 100 times and they work really well. And also I've just added a loop of string here and I just drilled a hole through, and that can be acted as a foot stirrup, which can easily be removed just by cutting the string or undoing the knot. So you can just pull the bands back much more easily, because when you press it into your chest to pull it back, it does dig into you quite a bit because of the heavy draw weight. So now I'm just going to load the slingshot pistol. So I just put my foot over the stirrup, and then I just grab the bands like this in 2 hands, pull it all the way back and over the trigger like this, and you'll hear a click when I pull it over, like that. And then I just let go of the bands like that. And then once you've slid the bands all the way back, you just push the bolt in like this, and then it's held in place by a metal clasp, and you push it all the way back until you feel it hit the trigger, and then you just aim and shoot. It even stabbed in quite deep into the archery foam target. So now I've gone and shortened the rubber on the slingshot pistol even more, and now the rubber's at the maximum that it can stretch to, and the slingshot pistol's really hard to load, but it shoots really powerfully. As you can see now, the rubber is really pre-tense, and when I take it off the rollers, it only goes about halfway up to here without stretching. So stretching it even just around the rollers takes a lot of strength, and then pulling it all the way back, I can't do it without using the rope as a stirrup. That's all for today, guys. Thanks for watching, and I really hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please hit the like button down below, and if you really enjoyed it, please subscribe to my channel. Also, if you have any future suggestions for anything that you want me to make in the future, just post a comment down below or send me a personal message. Also, if you have any questions about the build process, just send me a personal message or just post a comment down below, and I'll be sure to hopefully answer soon.